Now this Nintendo shelf is one that we have actually looked at in a video not too long ago, where I kind of already went over a lot of the things in this cabinet, so if you want to see a really in-depth review of this one, don't be afraid to go and check out that video, but we're definitely going to go over it all here again anyway. So let's go in and get that now. And starting on the top of the shelf, we have a whole bunch of Super Nintendo consoles, because that's definitely going to be a prominent thing that we see in here. One of them being the Donkey Kong set, which is definitely one of the coolest Super Nintendo bundles out there, as well as the Super Mario All-Stars set, which includes Super Mario All-Stars Plus World, which was the only way to obtain that game. It never had a separate boxed release in North America, but in other parts of the world it actually did kind of have its own individual release. Here we once again have the Donkey Kong box. We have a really cool Super Nintendo arcade stick, which you can hear like really nice clicky buttons and controllers, and these kind of separate, so you can either use them individually or you can stick them together, so it feels like one long kind of arcade board. That's just really cool. We have the Bomberman Party Pack, which includes Super Bomberman and the multi-tap. We also have a Japanese exclusive multi-tap, which looks like Bomberman's head. We have some extra games and such up here in case I ever needed them for boxes and things. Again, I just was able to come across them at stores back in the day and thought that I would hang on to them. We have a European Super Nintendo here. So one thing I have is I have a North American Super Nintendo, Japanese Super Famicom, and a European SNES, which was sent to me back in the day from an absolutely awesome viewer who lived in Europe at the, the UK at the time, and I believe does again. And I just love having things from different regions and, being able to display them all so that people can immediately see the ways that they look different. And you're going to see that the European Super Nintendo looks a lot more like the Japanese one with the rounded edges and such, but instead of saying, Super Famicom on it, it obviously says Super Nintendo. So thank you once again for, contributing that to the collection. I love that. I hope you enjoyed seeing the kind of differences too. I also love that the buttons are colored, but I will admit that I really like how on the North American Super Nintendo controller, the Y and X buttons have those indents that your thumb can really nicely sit in. I really miss that whenever I use a Super Famicom or European SNES controller. But maybe it's just me, maybe other people don't notice it as much, but I've always really liked those kind of indents. Back there we have a Super Nintendo power supply in original packaging sold separately, which is something I don't think you see too often. Super Nintendo Game Genie. Moving on down. Again, it's going to be kind of like North American over there, Japanese over here. So we get Japanese Mario Paint, Japanese Super Famicom, Super Famicom in the box. This right here is a memory card that you could take to a station back in the day and have any game that station had on it saved to this cartridge, and then you could go home and play it. So it's like, they didn't have to make individual packaging and such for every single game. You could just kind of get whichever one you want saved to it. We have a boxed copy of Earthbound. It's all in there, and I've done an unboxing of that on my channel at one point where, it has the instruction guide, rather not instruction guide, but like the player's guide and the game and all that. It's a very cool, complete in-box thing. This is the UFO, which allows you to copy your Super Nintendo games to floppy disk. Anyone who's ever wondered how a ROM is made, that's how it is. You put your game in there, you plug that into the Super Nintendo, and then bam, you get a floppy disk with whichever game you want to play on it. It's pretty crazy, although it seems like it's pretty outdated technology these days. You get a Super Nintendo arcade stick. Official one this time. Of course, those ones are like way better arcade quality, but the SNES Advantage isn't bad either. Just like the Genesis, there is the X-Band, which would allow you to play select Super Nintendo games online back in the day, but it was never, too successful of a service, I don't think. We get the top loader, rather not the top loader, but the Super Nintendo Mini, second release, complete in the box. Multi-tap complete in the box. Very basic Super Nintendo with no game or anything with it, complete in the box. The North American variation of the Super Nintendo, much more angular and just kind of purple rather than having a whole bunch of color to it. Two different versions of boxed SNES controllers, and a boxed sealed copy of Super Mario Omega. One of the greatest Super Nintendo or even Super Mario World ROM hacks ever released. Kind of. In 2009, maybe that was kind of true, but it's very outdated by today's standards. But moving on down, we are now on the GameCube shelf. No 64 in this cabinet, just because it needed a lot more space because of all the fantastic colors, so we'll be getting to that shortly in the next shelf over there. But yes, we jump right down to GameCube. We get a whole bunch of different kind of boxed versions, especially the Mario Strikers one. Definitely very obscure these days. One that comes with Paper Mario, the Thousand Year Door. We get the Hori kind of controller that looks like almost a Super Nintendo controller. Very cool for playing your Game Boy games on the Game Boy Player. We get a complete in-box Korean Game Boy Player, but unfortunately it's just kind of the basic black one. Of course, in other regions outside of North America, they got like the the Spice Orange or Silver Platinum versions of the Game Boy Player, but in North America we only got the boring black one. But here's a purple one. And as long as you have the disc that corresponds to your region, you can use any Game Boy Player you want on any GameCube. You just have to have, like, if your GameCube's North American, you have to have that North American GameCube player disc. So you can definitely mix and match. It's just something I've never put the effort into, but, like, of course, the Platinum Game Boy Player would look really nice along with a Platinum GameCube. This isn't just any Platinum GameCube, though, but rather it's the Pokemon XD Gale of Darkness version. Now, there wasn't too much GameCube variation in North America, kind of like the Dreamcast in North America. Japan had a lot more cool variations where we just kind of got the platinum, the black, and the indigo. But one kind of interesting variation that's, you wouldn't notice it initially, but if you look on top, is this one with the Pokemon XD nameplate, which is pretty neat. And there's also some sealed controllers and things too, which you're obviously not going to find too much of these days because once you open up this packaging, you're not getting the controller back into it. And this controller is also a special one too, which includes kind of like a transparent bottom, which is pretty neat. And when you really get down to it, you can see kind of the mess that sometimes hides on the shelves, where you'd never notice it if you were just like looking at it from here. But these are all cords and things that go along with the consoles that are sitting here. Moving on down, though, we have Wii, of course, comes after GameCube, and a whole bunch of just kind of cool different box things. We also have a couple of GameCube bundles here. Each of them include 2 controllers, and include games that would naturally be played with more than one person, so like Mario Kart Double Dash and Mario Party 7. Always thought that those were really cool bundles. Here we have like Wii remotes, the special Wii U bundle that came with the Ganondorf figure for Wind Waker HD. Whole bunch of kind of big box games. There were a lot of big box games around this time that would come with things like an extra Wii remote or amiibos and different things. This is also a still sealed copy of Zelda Skyward Sword, which includes the golden Wii remote, which is pretty cool. The golden wheel, which was a Club Nintendo exclusive item over in Japan, and going down, we get a whole bunch of Wiis. Now, these are not all like the same Wii, so like just because they're all the white box, they're not all the same. There are box variations, or sometimes they included different things, so that's why I have a whole bunch of different ones down at the bottom there. And yeah, I have the white one, the blue one, the black one, and the red one, once you all really look at it. And there's just a whole bunch of other kind of random assortment of things at the bottom as well. But with that, that is once again a look at this Nintendo cabinet. Again, it's not too long ago I actually did a look at this cabinet already, but hopefully you enjoyed seeing it again if you had already seen that previous video. But with that, we're now going to move on to the PlayStation 3 cabinet, which again, doesn't actually have PlayStation 3 in it, but I didn't have a sign that said N64, Neo Geo, TurboGrafx, etc., etc. So hopefully you will understand. So let's begin with the top, as we normally do, and you're going to find a couple of boxed Platinum GameCubes. It says limited edition, but I don't think that the Platinum version is all that much more difficult to find compared to the other ones. You also get some boxed Donkey Kong games for the GameCube, like Donkey Konga and Donkey Kong Jungle Beat, all of which had to include the bongos so that you could play them, and a couple other things as well, an NES Advantage and a Menacer box for the Genesis. That's different than the one we looked at previously. And of course, this PlayStation 3 sign is the original logo version, where the one down there is much more the more modern PlayStation 3 logo, which is literally the same as the PS2 one, but they put a 3 at the end. Simple, but how can you not love it? This top shelf here is all about Philips CDI and 3DO down there on the end. So again, back in the day, I never really, I mean, even today, I don't really buy all that much off the internet, but sometimes when you couldn't find things locally, online was just where you kind of had to go. And I really wanted some Philips CDI stuff and just wasn't finding it anywhere around here. So I bought a $200 Philips CDI lot that included 3 consoles, about 100 discs, and this was one of the consoles included in that bundle, and it came all in one massive heavy box, and this was at the bottom, and it got crushed. Supposedly during shipping. You wonder if maybe it was always kind of a problem unit, and they put it down there hoping that maybe it would just look like it got crushed. But like, for example, like this part is kind of broken off there. You can see it's beat up and such, and it's just overall never really worked. So thankfully the shipping had insurance, and I was able to get like $100 back from what I paid. So I actually still got a whole ton of awesome stuff for only $100, including Link: The Faces of Evil. So I did well. That roller controller was another thing included in there. This console was another one included. There are a lot of different versions of the CDI, and overall, I can't complain too much. This right here is actually the power adapter for the Amiga CD32 we'll be looking at soon. Here is the spoon controller. I want to talk about weird things for the Philips CDI. This is a controller for that. You, of course, also get the much more traditional styled game controller up there, but still, there isn't like one CDI controller that feels really good to use. Here's another CDI controller. Again, try playing Hotel Mario with that. Hotel Mario's bad enough. Adding a bad controller to it just makes it even less fun. Moving to the side though, we have the 3DO, of which there were 3 different variations of. You get the Gold Star version, and then 2 Panasonic versions, one that was top loading, and then one which I have a box one down here at the bottom of the shelf, which we'll get to, which is front loading. And you get some controllers and such for that as well. Inside here we have some demo discs and things, sampler CD. And yeah, that is just pretty much, this is like the obscure CD-based console shelf. You get your, 3DO and CDI, 2 pretty bizarre things, and unless you're probably like into video game collecting, you really haven't had the chance to try. Speaking of obscure CD things, we got this right here, but first let's talk about the Neo Geo, of course. SNK's awesome console, but very obscure and expensive. There are the Neo Geo set of arcade machines, one of which I own, we'll be looking at later on, and by having this console, you essentially got arcade quality games, exactly as they were in the arcade, in your living room, all with like an awesome controller and stuff, clicky control stick. It's just overall really cool, but man, especially these days they're expensive, and even back then, you wouldn't find too many people that had them, because they were really, really, not cheap. But then later on, there was the Neo Geo CD, which is pretty much the same thing, but the games are on CDs instead of these massive cartridges, which again, the cartridges aren't on the shelf, we'll look at them later. But I feel like the Neo Geo CD took a lot of the fun out of it. Suddenly you have loading times, it doesn't feel like that perfect arcade quality anymore. It does have a pretty neat controller though, I like the colors, and again, nice clicky control stick. And then speaking of clicky control sticks, you get the Neo Geo Pockets back there, those being the color versions, some pretty cool games for that. And again, just a portable console that tried to compete with the Game Boy back in the day, but obviously couldn't keep up, but still has a couple worthwhile games on it, should you ever have the chance to check one out. Yeah, Neo Geo, just so cool. You even get like a memory card here, one of the first consoles back in the day to like really have a memory card. And again, I have a 4-slot Neo Geo arcade machine, which we will see in the other room in the future. Moving on down, though, we are now back into Nintendo territory, and we got all of a whole bunch of different versions of the Nintendo 64. So I have all the fantastic colors here. We got the blue, green, orange, watermelon pink, and then moving down to the floor, the shelf below, we got the grape and the smoke gray. But before we get to those, let's look at a couple other things on this shelf. We got the Pokemon Stadium Battle Set. Now, this is a very obscure N64 bundle, which includes a whole bunch of things like a trading card and a guide for playing Pokemon Stadium. And getting all of that together is not easy, but I've actually done an unboxing of that for anyone who is curious in seeing more. And there's also, of course, the Pikachu bundle, one of the most, I think, iconic N64 sets. It's just all around very nice. I mean, going down again, we get the neon green N64 controller, which is pretty obscure these days. We get the Star Wars Episode 1 Racer N64 bundle, which unfortunately the console does not in any way look different. There's not like Star Wars etchings or designs or art or anything on it. It's just the most basic N64, but it includes the Star Wars game. The box is what's pretty cool there. This thing is much like the UFO for the Super Nintendo we looked at earlier. It's kind of a bootleg N64 development thing, which I believe could also be used to make some ROMs. Here we have a gold N64, definitely one of the most sought after versions, along with an official gold controller. And then moving on to the right, we again have some more boxed consoles. We have the complete in box Donkey Kong one, which came with the green version, and the orange and blue. Moving down, we get some boxed controllers, along with the DK-N64 controller, Donkey Kong 64 banana controller, where it looks like, you know, the bottom is like the edge, end of a banana, which is pretty cool. I believe the only way to get that was through like a Nintendo Power offer, so definitely not something you see too often these days. And then you get some Wii stuff, which is kind of like overflow from the shelf there. We got that later version of the Wii, which was top loading, get some controllers, and just all around some odds and ends. This right here is actually a Wii U bundle, which includes the white 8GB Wii U and a Skylanders game with the base and everything, so it's all in there. It's actually a really massive, awesome set. Over here, you get the Turbo Duo, complete in the box, which plays both TurboGrafx 16 games and Turbo CD games. You once again get inside the box that front-loading version of the Panasonic 3DO. Here's our first glimpse of Atari, really. We're about to get into a whole bunch of it inside of this shelf. But here we have the Atari 7800 Pro System, which also played 2600 games. You get the Odyssey 2. And then again, you got a little bit of overflow of Atari stuff, but I think we'll save all of that for when we're looking at this shelf here, which is when we really start to get retro. Now, you're heading back to the early 80s with Atari stuff, and then eventually in that far right cabinet, you get all sorts of Pong consoles and things as well, so hope you're looking forward to that. But this time, it's the Xbox cabinet with absolutely zero Xbox stuff in it. If anyone has an Atari 2600 sign, I will totally take that off your hands, should you be wishing to look to get rid of it. And also this right here, it's like an advertisement for The Legend of Zelda Ocarina of Time 3D. It sticks on to whatever you want it to with a magnet back there, but I think we'll take that off so you can get a better look at the shelves at this time. With that, it is now Atari time, but before we get to what's inside the cabinets, we of course always start with what's on top, and this time it's kind of like a random odds and ends of different consoles. We have one of those multi-consoles up there, which was all the rage a few years back. I think most people kind of resort to emulation now, but back in the day, people wanted those consoles that would play like NES, Super NES, and Genesis. Another Super Nintendo, one that's not as good of condition as some of the other ones we've looked at, Odyssey 200, and a bunch of power pads. The bottom one just being the one that you could buy at the store, with that white box on top being the version that came inside of the power set. Now let us move down here to what is actually inside the cabinet. I guess we'll open up the door here, and there's lots of massive boxes in this cabinet, because back in the day, they just figured if we make our box absolutely massive on the shelf, everybody's going to want to buy it. And I mean, the Atari 400 computer is kind of big, but at the same time, that's like a really massive box for it as well. But yes, that's the computer that's inside the Atari 400. Let's move over here. So you get a little bit of an idea of what's over here. We have the Coleco Atom computer, along with the keyboard. It, of course, is kind of like the computer upgrade version of the ColecoVision over there. Here we have an Atari 400 computer, and we have the XE here, which we're going to see in the box in a second. I have done an unboxing of that like way back when. Down here we have the Atari Jaguar with its crazy controller. We got the toilet accessory, which goes on top, also known as the Jaguar CD. We have the Lynx 2 in the box, another Lynx 2 outside of the box, Lynx 1 inside of its foam carrying case. And then moving over to the left here again, we get the Amiga CD32, which I have done a review of. We also sampled some games, and both the N-Gage and N-Gage QD complete in the box. And I have done a complete unboxing and review of the original N-Gage. So yeah, that's a really quick review, or rather overview, of the things that we can expect from here. And moving on down, let's go to where we have the Atari 2600 shelf. Now, unless you kind of get down here, you don't notice that there's 2600s behind other 2600s, but they're all different versions. Like this is the original 6-switch model, which has that kind of rounded edges on the front, so you know it's the heavy 6er, which has like a ton of copper wire inside and is way heavier than the later 6-switch model, which has a different looking front. We get the black Vader version, and another 2-switch version behind that, and then we get the Telegames version of the console, I believe sold by Sears, which doesn't actually say Atari on it, but instead says Video Arcade, and then a couple of the mini versions in the back. Moving on down though, we get the Atari 5200. Now, there are two different boxes that I have of this one in particular. So here we have, I believe, what is the original Atari 5200 box, and this version of the console had 4 controller ports on the front, but it still only came with 2 controllers, and it also came with a Super Breakout cartridge as well. But moving back here to the left, this case requires a lot of switching back and forth. Sorry, no, this one is a 2600. The other 5200 is down here, and this is when the box got much smaller, and I believe there were only 2 controller ports on the front by this point, rather than the 4 that it previously had. But this is another 2600 box. There's definitely been quite a few versions of those over the years. Here again is a 5200 sitting on top of that, though. You can see that's the 4 controller port variant. This in this box right here is actually one of the mini Atari 2600 consoles. Star Raiders, again that 5200. And then moving over here, here is another Atari computer, the 1040 ST. And it is inside an absolutely gigantic box, which unfortunately doesn't really have all that much artwork or anything on it. So it's pretty plain on the shelves compared to everything else. But of course I had to find a spot for it somewhere. Here's something you don't find too often, an actual complete in-box Atari 5200 controller. People will probably know that those things are totally unreliable. So people back in the day probably had to buy a lot of replacements, and the more of those that you have, the better, of course. Here is an Atari 7800 console. Of course, that one over there was also a 7800, so Atari just had lots and lots and lots of box variants. Like these 2 boxes at the bottom are Atari 2600s. And of course, there was that one as well, so you got a few different boxes there. There is an Odyssey 300. We saw the 200 on the top of this cabinet. We had an Atari 800 computer in that box, Atari XE in that box. It's a huge box. And then moving to the right here, to finish off this shelf, we have a Sega Genesis video game organizer. It's not like a console or anything, it's just a plastic tray that you can use to organize all of your games and sits on top of your TV. And this thing at the very bottom is actually a complete in-box Philips CDI, something you probably really don't see all that often. And it's just like a plain cardboard box, almost reminds you of like getting a VCR or a DVD player back in the day. It doesn't scream video game console because it's not really. Of course, the CDI also had movies and other crazy things. Like it came with a free copy of Compton's Interactive Encyclopedia, totally worth $149.98. And if you disagree with that, maybe you should just go buy a Nintendo or something like that. You're some kind of peasant, not good enough for Philips CDI. And that is the entirety of my Xbox / Atari / boxed Philips CDI shelf. Hopefully, that was a good overview. I feel like that one went pretty quickly. I don't, I guess, have too much to say about Atari. Atari kind of speaks for itself. There's lots of different models. And you got the 5200, 2600, 7800, Jaguar, and then all the different kinds of computers, which we could just spend like all day talking about each one of those individually. But to just go over them, I don't feel like I have too much more to say at this time. Thank you so much once again for checking out my videos. I really appreciate it. And if you enjoyed, please consider leaving a like and subscribing, as it really helps my channel out. With that said, hope to see you next time.